We want to talk about the Synod tonight, and I know we've got lots of competition between football and hockey and other events going on, so.
Out of here at 8.
Paul's already looked at his watch, he'll never be out of here by 8, so.
Nothing will happen at 8 o'clock anyway.
I know, it doesn't start till 8:15, but I gotta get home.
All right, so the Synod on synodality, because you're probably picking up bits and pieces of this. But many have lots of questions of what is it all about and why are we doing this and what's behind it. And so especially here in Detroit, because we've not really engaged it a whole lot. So let's jump in. I want to start off with some basics about synods before we get into the current synod on synodality. What is a synod? The word synod simply comes from two Greek words. Syn meaning together, hodos meaning way, so to walk together, to journey together, to travel a path together. That's what it means, at least from its etymology. So, simply put, a synod is a meeting or an assembly of church leaders. And the idea of a synod varies quite a bit based on whether you are Roman Catholic, whether you are Eastern Orthodox, or whether you are Protestant. All of us use that word a little bit differently. And that's part of where confusion comes in. But the first thing I want to clarify before I jump into other denominations is a Catholic synod. Because we want to clarify the difference between a synod and a council. A council can deal with doctrine. A synod will not. A synod could deal with church disciplines. And again, sometimes people confuse what's a doctrine, what's a discipline. That's another whole question. A synod can deal with disciplines. It can deal with current issues. It can deal with the direction of a church on a particular matter, but it's not going to deal with doctrine. So one of the differences between a council and synod is just that. Another one is that when you have a council, you would invite at least all the bishops of the world to come together. In a synod, you normally invite representatives from bishop conferences to come, but you don't bring all the bishops in. So those are really the two main differences. Is you're not going to have all the bishops, we're not going to be working with doctrines, to keep it simple. Now, in several of our Protestant sisters and brothers, they use the word synod to describe their entire gathering, their entire church. And in a sense, that's a very accurate way of using the word synod. St. John Chrysostom, one of the great fathers of the church, said that the word synod is synonymous with church. So Protestants are not really wrong in doing that. And for example, you may have heard of Lutheran Church Missouri Synod or Lutheran Church Wisconsin Synod. Those are two different branches of the Lutheran Church. And the Lutheran Church we're probably most familiar with is the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, which doesn't use synod in its title. So, in Protestant denominations, sometimes the word synod simply refers to their entire body, their entire church. Now, in the Eastern Orthodox churches, they really do use the word synod and council pretty much interchangeably. For them, the synod, the council, the gathering of bishops, making issues, deciding church teaching, pretty much one and the same. So you kind of have to know what denomination you're in and how that word's being used. For us, it's much more of a narrow event than it is for the Orthodox. So how did we start getting synods? That takes us to Vatican II. Remember, Vatican II, back from 62 to 65, all the bishops came together along with the Eastern Church patriarchs. We had leading Protestant figures there. It was truly a gathering, not just of Catholics, of very much larger Christian world. And what happened in the midst of that time is that the bishops who were gathered there, we hadn't had a council, in a long time, since, over 100 years. So no one had experienced this before, and the bishops who were there said, this is pretty nice, we should do this more often. And so actually what happened is one of the Eastern Rite Catholics, so an Eastern Rite who's in union with the Pope, kind of being clever and build on the momentum of the bishops all gathered together, was passing around the idea, maybe we should use this as our model and allow these gatherings to be the supreme decision-making body of the church. We had that battle with the Eastern Church a long time ago. And so it was kind of a backdoor way of building the momentum on the council and see if we can change the direction here of the Western Church. But Pope Paul VI, who was in charge of the council at that time, his background was the diplomatic corps. Okay, he was never like a pastoral type bishop. He had worked through the Vatican diplomatic. So being the diplomat that he was, and catching wind of this momentum that was taking place, he jumped in with a document proposing that you're absolutely right. Coming together like this is a great idea. We need to do it more often. Let's create a synod of bishops that meet every 4 years. And basically what he did is he set up guidelines for a synod of bishops that would be consultative to the Pope. In other words, he was cutting this off before it got too much momentum building, and says, no, the bishops gathered are not going to be the definitive decision makers. That's still going to be me. But we certainly can gather every 4 years and talk about different issues and bring your ideas to me, and then I'll let you know. So that's really how it began. And it led to get this whole thing started, we have to have the creation then of national bishop conferences. And then from those bishop conferences, the way it was set up and has been set up for a long time is that when you were to call a synod, the Pope would choose a number of representatives from each national gathering of bishops. The bishops themselves would choose an equal number. So the Pope basically got to choose half of the bishops who would gather, and then each bishop conference would pick the other half. And they would come together and discuss various issues. And so we've been having synods right along since Vatican II. So again, in our normal course of action, a synod simply is consultative to the Holy Father. Now there's 3 types of synods, maybe 4. You notice I put the other one kind of in parentheses there. So there are basically 3 types of synods, maybe 4. Ordinary synods. Ordinary synods are the ones we call every 4 years. And the first of these kind of at the beginning, because it was new and shiny, it kind of, people were kind of paying attention. Over the course of time since Vatican II and since it's being new and shiny, we kind of started forgetting about it. It's simply what happened. But the very first synod, anyone want to take a guess? No. The very first synod was basically, they worked out a revision of canon law. That's what would lead to the 1983 code. It ultimately came out of that very first synod. That was the first synod. The second synod impacted the church a bit more. It was on it was a 2-parter. The first part was on the ministerial priesthood, The second part was on justice in the world. And that Synod on Justice gave us a very powerful phrase that really jettisoned all the church social teaching, because of the phrase that came out of that synod was action on behalf of justice is constitutive to preaching the gospel. So literally, if we're not acting on behalf of justice, we are not preaching the gospel. It's a very, very powerful phrase that came out of that. After that, we had synods on evangelization, on catechesis, on the Christian family, on the sacrament of reconciliation, so on and so forth. Occasionally, we would have an extraordinary synod. Most of these are going to be an extraordinary synod is going to be internal. Probably one of the biggest ones that we had was the one that looked at, now that we've had these bishops' conferences functioning for a while, how do they actually work in relationship to the papacy? What's the relationship between the Vatican offices and these bishop conferences? And how do they work together? How do they work separately? What belongs to the bishop conferences? What doesn't belong to them? So that was an extraordinary synod that took place. Another synod that took place, the extraordinary synod, was simply to commemorate the 20th anniversary of Vatican II. So basically, the extraordinary ones are ones to deal with things that are out of that 4-year cycle that are significant issues. The special synods, and I put local in parentheses as kind of the fourth, because the special synods were kind of local. Maybe not the way we think of local, but we went through a phase about the mid-80s to the mid-90s, where we would have a synod for Western Europe and a synod for South America and a synod for the United States. So we had these kind of continental regional synods throughout the world over roughly a period of a decade. So there's different types of synods. The ordinary, extraordinary, the special synods. There's also local synods. So a diocese can have a synod. And Judy Holmes is back there. She helped me a bit with this one because some of you may remember, if you're around my age, you might remember Synod 69. Cardinal Dearden called a synod throughout the Archdiocese of Detroit. It was for 1969, called Synod 69. It basically, remember, 1969, the council wraps up in 65, so we're 4 years out of the council. And part of the vision of the council was that the church is the entire people of God, not just the hierarchy, which was a big change for us. I mean, we were coming out of an era where, the church is whatever the pastor said, whatever the bishop said, whatever sister said, and suddenly this is supposed to be our church, but we don't know what to do, what that means, and it doesn't really mean anything. So what Cardinal Dearden insisted on, because this was coming right out of the council, he insisted on 2 years of preparation before we even began the work of the synod. Because he realized people had to get familiar with what Vatican II was about, why it did what it did, why were these changes being made to the liturgy. So all of that had to be explained before we could actually have a synod. So there was 2 years of preparation, and then we had Synod 69. And the numbers of that era are kind of amazing. We had 7,000 groups come together in that synod throughout the Archdiocese. I don't think we'll see those kind of numbers for any kind of church event. It will be hard for us to see anything like that. Not 7,000 people, 7,000 different groupings. So you figure each of those groupings, you're probably talking 10 times at least that of people coming together to discuss various issues over a course of 6 weeks. And then literally thousands of proposals were made, and those had to be honed down to something workable. And what did that synod finally do? Well, it really gave us our essential structure as an archdiocese. Out of that synod, we formed parish councils, which we had not had. We take that for granted. We didn't have those before then. The idea of having Christian service coordinator, director of faith formation, a business manager, that whole structure that we take for granted today in the parish came out of that synod in '69, and it mirrored the downtown offices. They did the same thing. So those same offices were part of the archdiocese. We also formed vicariates, so parishes could work together based on geography and the region and commonalities and things like that. So a lot of things came out of that, but behind it is the whole idea that the church is the entire people of God, not just simply part of, not just of following blindly the hierarchy, whatever they tell you. We had another local synod in 2016. Synod 16. Once in a while you'll hear Archbishop Big Brown refer to that. It may be too early, maybe we're too close to it to get a sense of it. In 2016, the emphasis was going to be on evangelization, becoming more of a missionary church, because we recognize that, Catholics are falling off left and right. We're not bringing that many new people, so the whole focus now is evangelization and mission. Pope Francis, let's enter Pope Francis. When Pope Francis was elected, shortly after he was elected, he was pretty blunt on what he thought about the current process of synods in the church. Maybe he had heard the jokes that reporters told. I mentioned that, the first few synods, we were all excited about them, and then as time went on, we kind of like, it's another synod. No, we really quit paying attention. Well, a reporter who works in the Catholic press told me that the line of those who covered the Vatican in more recent synods, their line was, as the bishops were meeting for the synod, the Pope was sitting in the audience room editing the final document. In other words, it was a done deal before they even met. Documents were written as far as people were, these synods weren't going to do anything. And so, people quit paying attention to them. Pope Francis, early on, within the first year, he acknowledged that the current process of our synods was half-baked. That's the best translation I can do from the Italian. In his mind, it was not giving us the broad idea of collegiality that the Second Vatican Council had envisioned. And what he did, hoping to jumpstart that, was that me? Okay, I don't know. All right, so he jumpstarted that process. At least he thought he did.
It's you.
It's me, I don't know, I'm doing something here. He appointed 9 cardinals to really get a whole different process in place, and to advise him in that direction. To be honest, that never really run anywhere. Because, when you appoint people who are kind of part of the system already, they're probably not going to change the system. I mean, that's been one of the Pope's struggles, really from day one. What he began doing is he began holding a number of extraordinary synods, that second category I mentioned. He had an extraordinary synod on the family, one on youth in the church, one on the Amazon in terms of climate and the impact on that. He's actually used the extraordinary synod more than any of the previous popes. But what's interesting is that not only has he used extraordinary synods more, before those synods, he always urged the local bishops to engage in a consultative process and to have listening sessions with the laity in their dioceses and invite more of them to participate and be part of the gatherings before we actually have the synod. In short, it sounds a lot like what Cardinal Dearden was doing here in Detroit back in '69. And that was kind of very much what Francis is telling the bishops. This is what you need to do. You have to open these up. So the Synod on Synodality. And this is great. I'm moving right through this, so we'll have time to do a few things tonight. The Synod on Synodality. That's the logo, by the way, which you may have never seen until just now. Because as I said, we basically in Detroit have just completely ignored it. It's like it's not there. You'll see it's 221 to 2023, and that was the original schema. It was going to be a synod over 3 years, and then as we got into the second year, Pope Francis said we better add another year. This is going to take a little bit longer than we thought. So now it's actually to 224. So synodality itself refers to the way that a synod makes decisions. It includes listening to a broad range of people, discussing the issues together with the goal of hearing what the Holy Spirit is saying to us. The key word here is listening. The point of this whole process is really to listen and to hear each other. Not only to hear where we stand on the issues, hear our story, hear who we are, hear how we got to be where we're at, why I see things the way I see them, and how you see things the way you see them. To start understanding one another as people, as brothers and sisters in Christ, and not just to see issues. Let me tell you a story of this from my own life. And of course, this was long before I heard of Pope Francis and synodality. But I was a student at the North American College, and right away, my first year, there was a guy, I think he was 2 years ahead of me, maybe one or 2 years ahead of me. He was from a very rural diocese. And I think we've all had the situation, we don't really like to admit as Christians, but we've all had the situation we just look at someone and they don't like us, we don't like them. And we really haven't even said hello yet. And there's just some feeling though, it's just like, and that's how the two of us were. And we saw things very differently. We had a very different view of the church. He saw me as someone who could care less about church traditions, and I just cared about helping people. If I'm going to do that, well, why am I be a social worker? Don't be a priest. And I looked at him as being, all you care about is church law, and how can you be a priest when you're so cold and uncaring? And that was kind of how we saw each other. And really, we did the best to avoid each other. It was just easier that way. And then one afternoon, and the afternoon afterwards, I barely had a breakfast in the morning, so I was starving. And in Italy, lunch is your big meal. I came into the refectory, the dining hall, and there's only one place open. Let me look around again, am I sure? I don't have enough money to go out to get something this one spot. Okay, I'll sit. And he was kind of like he'd be at my right, he'd like the head of the table, I'll sit next to him, and I thought, okay, I'll eat real fast, and I'll try to keep my mouth shut, and just, how well that went. Before the salad was on our plates, the two of us were just already going at it. And, it was almost like there were only two people at the table at that point. Because I think everyone else either was ignoring us or watched us. I'm not sure, because we were just going at it. And, we sat there into our argument, but then things started to shift. And we really started talking and listening. And pretty soon the dishes were cleared away and the table was empty except for us. Eventually, even those who were working for the college were going home. I mean, I don't know how long he and I sat there in this big empty room talking to each other. And, when it was done, no opinions were changed. But we came to respect and understand each other. And I could look at him and say, yeah, I see why you're studying to be a priest, and I can appreciate that and understand that. And he could see the same about me. And so even though we might still disagree on things, all of that mistrust and animosity had fallen away. That's what's really at the heart of this process. And we're trying to get beyond the idea of liberals, conservatives, winners, losers, that whole approach, and trying to really come to a point where we simply understand, respect, and honor each other in the midst of those differences. So that's really kind of Francis's dream for the Synod. What makes it different is because, first of all, it's over 4 years. Other synods have been a representative of Rome, bishops come to Rome, they discuss an issue over a number of days, all that goes to the Pope, he writes a document, that's it. And then it's up to the bishops to do what they do with that document in their own dioceses. And sometimes they would do things with it, other times it would simply go on a shelf, collect dust. So this is the Synod itself is a process. It's not going to be a one-shot thing. The other thing is that he's not just inviting the bishops. He's done what he encouraged the other bishops to do, consulting the laity. And so the Synod is based on a number of meetings that have already taken place among lay folks of all kinds of different persuasions. And then some of these were invited to be part of the Synod. And not just to be part of the Synod to talk, and not just to consult. It's the first time in our history that we have lay folks who are voting at the Synod. A major change, which some of the bishops are happy about and some are not happy with at all. I mean, right now we have, we have some bishops who say this is not a true Synod because there's lay people at it, therefore you can't count it. We have another bishop today who, on the way home from the Synod, because they just ended this weekend, he said we should never have a Synod again without laity. So there we have it. So, but I think what's really behind this is Pope Francis is looking, really trying to look down the road. He wants a new way of being church, a new way of us conducting ourselves is what he's looking at. So that's what's behind this. There's a much bigger, something much bigger at play than simply looking at a particular topic and writing a document. So let me kind of walk you through the process of this and how this has happened, because we've not really been a big part of this. So, the first part of this has been the diocesan phase. And that was this little document that came out, the National Synthesis from the United States. that, again, we weren't really, had a big role in. Basically what happened is you had these listening sessions in various parishes all over the country for those who were participating, and they came and listened to one another, and then the topics and things were put together, and all of that moved forward to the next phase, which was the continental phase. And now in the continental phase, notice continental, we're moving beyond. Our continental for us was US and Canada. And that led to this document for a synodal church, which is a document that fed into the universal phase over here. Now, obviously, as each step goes, there are questions and issues. One of the issues for this particular phase is why the US and Canada, why not the US, Canada, and Mexico? That was kind of like, why are we really we're kind of pushing out the Hispanics if we don't really bring them into the big three and just have the big two. And yeah, there was plenty of discussion around that. So just to get an idea, none of these are going off like without any criticism. Pope Francis wanted the church throughout the synod to cast a wide net from the very beginning. I mentioned when we held Synod 16 here in Detroit, we're kind of cast a narrow net. We're only looking for a certain kind of Catholic. Francis wanted just the opposite. Yes, we definitely want practicing faithful Catholics to come together and listen to one another. But Francis said, let's also listen to the Catholics who've walked away. Can we see if we can talk to them and hear what they're saying? Can we talk to the folks that feel estranged from the church, both from the left and the right? And let's hear what they're saying. Let's talk to the divorced and remarried. Let's talk to the gay and lesbian. Let's talk to those who want the Latin Mass. He purposely said, let's cast this net. Let's talk to non-Catholics and see what they think about the Catholic Church. I wonder how do they see the Catholic Church? What's their perception of us? This idea is to cast this net as wide as possible, to get as much of a consensus as we can. And, that was his goal going into that. So much so that, each of the regions, for lack of, we simply call them regions, they were geared towards, US, Canada, whatever it might be, Mexico, Latin America, so forth. Everyone had their regional number. And then the Pope created the infamous Region 16. Region 16 was for anyone else who didn't fit in. So folks who could not otherwise be consulted had a region that they could go to, so to speak, and get their input put in. Actually, I was part of one of those Region 16 meetings, because as we were moving into this phase, if somebody dawned on someone somewhere that, you're just kind of assuming that those who are in the theological community are maybe in their parishes or something, but most of them are at universities and they're not part of a normal parish life. And so for members of the Catholic Theological Society, we never had a voice yet. And so we created a listening session for members of that body. And I felt a little bit guilty for signing up, because to be honest, for the past couple of decades, all I've really done is pay my dues. I mean, I've gone to no meetings and all that kind of stuff, but this was my little doorway to get in on a listening session, so I thought, well, I'll try to sit back and be as quiet as I can and maybe don't notice me, but, and then of course what happened was, as it turned out, there was a woman religious who knew someone from here in Detroit. Oh, you're in Detroit, right? Do you know so-and-so? We got into this whole, I couldn't stay hidden at that point anymore, but, so I mean, so yet we're trying to, like, my idea is we're trying to find all these little groupings that we might not ordinarily think of if we even just look at parish life. And so like, the idea was to cast that net as wide as possible, so that it can be a very rich discussion. That goes beyond, again, the narrow confines of left and right, that kind of thing. So then we move to the universal phase, which we have just wrapped up the meetings in Rome, just this weekend. 365 voting delegates, that's bishop and laity, 92 lay, 45 women. And sitting here in the US, that sounds like, okay, that's nice, so what? But as someone wrote in American Magazine, as we're looking for, what are they going to do? Are they going to change this? Are they going to change that? As this guy wisely wrote, he says, you have to understand that in many ways the process itself is the point. We can't be looking for all kinds of big changes immediately. The process is important, and you have to recognize that for many of these bishops, this is the very first time they've sat at round tables just like this with lay people as their equal. With a layperson who can say something and they have to listen to it, and the layperson who votes with the same vote that they get. And that dynamic in itself for many bishops is enough to deal with right now. I mean, I know that, for us that may not sound, but we have to recognize where, again, in our sense of listening, where some of these folks are coming from, that is a big deal for them to handle. In what Francis has done with this. So, that's kind of where we're at right now. We have one more phase. We're gonna do this all again in October, a year from now. So, why are we doing this? Why a synod on synodality? Which does not roll off the tongue very easy. I had to kind of practice that. So a synod on synodality, because I think, even though there's a long way to go, I think at some point, Francis kind of realized that the only way to make this happen is to start doing it. We simply had to move forward with this process. Is it going to overhaul our decision-making process overnight? No, probably not. It's going to take a while. In fact, I could even envision something where, remember, Pope Francis is not a young man. And God forbid, God calls him home, and the next Pope or two just kind of sits on this, possibly. And then, in another couple of generations, the Pope comes along, and suddenly Francis is going to become like this incredible visionary that, gee, why didn't we pick up on him way back then? It could be one of those kind of situations. I don't know. Or we could have the next Pope say, we're going to go full speed ahead with this. That's impossible to know. But I think the fact that Francis has opened the door to this, it's going to be very hard to bring it back in. You cannot give people a voice and have them participate, and then suddenly say, okay, that just doesn't work very well. If we do that, we're going to lose a lot more Catholics. seriously. It won't be a wise strategy to do that. So we will simply have to see where this goes. Can we back up to the, I kind of went out of my own, I started talking and kind of missed on my own word here a little bit, so, yeah, one back. The continental phase, I mentioned main topics. What happened is the discussions of that diocesan phase got sifted down and narrowed down into a number of topics that are outlined here. I'm going to just go through them very quickly without any kind of comment. Among those topics were young people and the lack thereof in the church today, people with disabilities, the place of women in the church, LGBTQ people in the church, ecumenical engagement, Western and non-Western cultures, challenge of trust with the church in the light of the pedophilia scandal, clericalism, some financial issues that have surfaced. What about more traditional Catholics? You know, the folks who want the Trinity liturgy in Latin, what's there for them? The big topic overall is that people were crying out for formation. The sense was folks want to get engaged, they want to be more active and involved, but they really need help in learning how to listen. And more help with catechesis and understanding the faith, and more in help with evangelization. And I know with evangelization, I really feel part of the struggle for us as Catholics is we see the need to evangelize, we want to evangelize, but we know our form of evangelization is not standing on a street corner asking people if they're saved. We know that's not us. But okay, we know it's not us, but what is us? And I think part of the struggle for it is we as a church and as lay folks, we need to find a language to evangelize. I think it's hard for us to do that because we haven't had to do it. It hasn't been part of our culture as a church. So, okay, back to results. Because we all want to know what's going to happen. You know, one of my favorite theologian, at least in terms of reading, was Juan Luis Segundo, who also happens to be a Latin American. And I don't know if he influenced Francis at all at any point. To me, it seems like he has, because one of Segundo's constant criticisms, I quoted it often, is Segundo would often say is that the first step in evangelizing is to listen, which is something the Catholic Church doesn't do. There's no need to listen when you're under the illusion that you already have the answers. And that was what Segundo said, and that's part of our whole problem. We think we already have the answers, so we don't have to listen, and therefore we can't evangelize. So I think it's interesting that Pope Francis is putting so much emphasis on listening. You know, we really need to listen, and and aiming for that sense of unity, even when there is some disagreement. I just want to read something here that came from Gerald O'Connell, also writing in America Magazine. Because what comes next? Well, what came at the end of this synod, what was expected was a 20-page document to take us to the next step. I understand it's a 40-page document, so twice as long as what was expected. So O'Connell writes, the synthesis document, that's referring to that 40-page document, will contain not only the substantial points of convergence reached by the assembly, but also for the first time in the history of a synod, it will include the substantial points of divergence. It will put forth where we disagree. And we've never done that before. It will also indicate questions that need to be deepened and present proposals that may require more substantial work from theologians, canon lawyers, as well as the laity. So things that are still open-ended that we need advice in. And then Father Timothy Radcliffe, who's been very active in the Synod, said this: when people come back from the Synod, he's really directing these comments to those who are at the Synod. He said when people return home, the global culture of our time is so polarized and dismissive of other views. The question is going to be, well, whose side were you on, and did you fight for our side, and did you oppose those unenlightened people? And he said, we will need to be very prayerful and resist the temptation to succumb to that party political way of thinking. The synodal process is organic and ecological rather than competitive. It is more like planting a tree than winning a battle. And as such, it will be hard for many to understand, perhaps sometimes even ourselves. But if we keep our minds and hearts open to the people whom we have met here, vulnerable to their hopes and fears, their words will germinate in our lives and ours and theirs. And there will be an abundant harvest, a fuller truth, and the church will be renewed. So we are looking at a process. So the idea that, by next year we'll have women deacons or some other kind of thing is going to happen, I really wouldn't bet on it. Though we may be more open to women in ministry in some capacity, and we may learn to be a bit more careful with our language and more accepting and respectful and things like that. This is an open-ended process. I think one of the things that I struggled with when I began working, both I wrote an article on this for I was actually asked to write an article for one of the church publications, and as I did the research for that, and as I did the research on the bishop's website, which you can find all this stuff, is in the USCCB website, when it mentions the Synod, it talks about how the Synod begins in 2021, it will conclude in October of 2024. And it's like, I don't think so, guys. I don't think you're getting it. Pope Francis does not envision really a conclusion. He really wants us to look at a new way of being church. So what are some next steps? We have that document that literally came out today, and they are rapidly translated. It's in Italian right now. They are rapidly translated into the other major languages. So we will have that document. The presumption is, and I want to stress presumption, is that we'll be able to use that document to actually have more listening sessions and to discuss what that document leaves for us to discuss. There is a group here in Detroit called the Detroit Synodal Collaboration, DSC for short, Detroit, and they are working, it's a group of priests and laity who are working to facilitate more emphasis, more education, more participation for us in the Synod. And so I have a feeling we'll be working a bit more with them. Also on November 9th, if you're able to, it's going to be in the afternoon, but Father Tom Reese, who is a Jesuit, a former editor of American Magazine, who's been covering the Synod, he's going to be here. The organization called the Elephants in the Living Room, they brought speakers here before, they are sponsoring him that Thursday afternoon, and he will be here. And since he's fresh from the Synod, we will literally have a first-hand eyewitness account of what took place and what may or may not be coming. So that's that part of the Synod in a nutshell. Now what I'd like to do is use you as guinea pigs. Do you want to be guinea pigs?
Yeah.
what I'd like to do is do a mini listening session. To do a real listening session, we would probably need about 3 hours, and we don't have that. So I thought we'd do a mini listening session. So the first thing I'm gonna need to do is some of you who are by yourselves, you could form tables and, at least get like 6 folks at least at a table, roughly. Could be. I know it takes you way out of your comfort zone, but.
Three more.
All right, so here are the ground rules for our mini listening session. Remember, the goal is active listening. So to listen is simply understand where the person is coming from as they are. So don't listen to only what they say, but what they mean, what they're experiencing, what they're feeling. So go beyond just the words. No responding. Don't be sitting there while someone's talking thinking, I'm going to say this, or I can answer that, or I can fix that, or No, because you're not going to do any of that. You are not going to respond to them. You're not going to fix anything for them. You're not going to answer their questions. You're just going to listen and leave it at that, okay? Because we do that all the time when we're talking to someone. We're already answering them while they're talking in our brain. We're answering it like, no, that's not listening. Listening without judgment to what's said. Because your experience is your experience, and we're okay with that. If you're speaking, speak honestly as best you can, your mind, your heart, as clearly as you can. And of course, we're doing this like hot off unexpected, so I know you really have no chance to be here. So, we'll do the best we can with that. No blaming. Okay? The old I sentence thing, no. So, none of this is that, the bishops make me angry when, please own your own anger. I'm angry when. Okay? That's a tough one, but we do that kind of stuff all the time. Someone else is responsible for my feelings. No, they're not. Your feelings are your feelings. Own them. Silence. No one has to speak. I don't want anyone to feel pressured like they have to say something. That's not helpful. In fact, it might be helpful if one person at each table does not speak. Okay? Because I want one person at each table to do probably the most difficult task. It will be your task to summarize what everyone has heard at your table. And I say difficult because when I say summarize, I don't mean say, well, so-and-so this, so-and-so that. No. Kind of bring it together in a brief statement. Not 6 or 7 individuals, but kind of, this was the general trend. This was the general direction. This is kind of where this group is. That's tough. So that's why it might be helpful for that person not to speak. Because they're going to have to listen very carefully and try to pull that together for their group. Okay, I think we can do that. Now, in a normal listening session, you would have all kinds of separate questions to do it. I'm only going to give each table one question tonight. So, if you are at these 2 tables here, you take the question on the left. How would you describe your relationship with the Catholic Church today? Has it changed over time? How would you call it fulfilling? Why or why not? So you've got the question on your left, these 2 tables here. The 3 tables over there, take the question on your right. What do you think is the mission of the church? What areas of mission is the church fulfilling? What need more attention? What are being neglected altogether? So take a few moments, think about it, pray about it, and then when you're ready to start conversing, again, one person speaks, everyone else listens. It's not meant to be a dialogue, it's not meant to be a group discussion. Each person speaks their own experience in dealing with that question. Okay? And that's one of the things I wanted to before we go home. Not to get into a discussion with. I just want you to think about it as you go home.
how might this impact the life of a parish? What if we look at parish council meetings and finance council meetings and things like that through the lens of really listening to each other, listening to speak to the community, how it would affect the choir, I mean, all those kind of things. If this became kind of the foundational approach for us moving forward. So just something to ponder, to think about and pray over. All right, so thank you very much, and good Halloween. Oh, we have announcements.
Announcements, I'll try yelling. Don't forget, next month's adult faith formation, November the 27th. Okay, that's after Thanksgiving. It's Vicky Figueroa. I always spell it.
Figaro.
Thank you. From the downtown office for cultural ministries will be here. The talk is on Catholics and being anti-racist or promoting the goodwill of all people. This is what she does. So she will be here in a month, give or take. So a very different kind of talk. If you'd like to invite your friends, we'll have the advertising up as soon as we can. Okay, so November 27th is the next adult faith. My class, part 2 on sacraments, we're doing baptism next Tuesday. So a week from tomorrow. Yeah, a week from tomorrow. Okay, those are the announcements.
Okay, then, and Thursday, November 9th, Father Tom Reese with reporting from the Synod, what happened and what might be to come or what might not happen. So that'll be Thursday afternoon at 1 o'clock, November 11th. So, all right.